Wrestling biopics. Do we need them? That is the discussion for today's show. Welcome to the Saturday movie show, everyone. My name is AP, or you can call me Not So Hollywood Hulk Hogan, brother. Yeah, this is my Hulk Hogan attire today because I am honouring one of my favourite wrestlers, Hulk Hogan, Hollywood Hulk Hogan, in this episode where I'm talking about wrestling biopics. And yeah, I've got my championship belt. These are kind of like George Michael glasses, and I got a bandana, and I've got no muscles really, very flat muscles, small muscles, and not quite the Hollywood Hulk Hogan level, but you know what? He's an inspiring guy, and I've got to try my best to honour the great Hulkster. So let me just put the belt to one side for one moment, ladies and gents. The belt is back where it belongs, and let's crack on with the episode. So, wrestling biopics. Why did I want to talk about wrestling biopics today? The reason being, on Saturday Movie Show, is because there's talk of a few different biopics, wrestling biopics coming out soon, and I thought it'd be a really good discussion. So first of all, we've got upcoming biopics that are in the works currently. So we've got the Hulk Hogan biopic that is set to star Chris Hemsworth in, actor Chris Hemsworth, and he is going to be starring as Hollywood Hulk Hogan. It'll just be the Hulk Hogan era during his era with the WWF, the World Wrestling Federation. And another upcoming one is a sitcom based on the young years of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the pro wrestler, WWE champion, The Rock turned fantastic Hollywood actor, and that is coming out soon. I believe that is a Netflix one. I think they're both Netflix projects, these. But the Young Rock will be a sitcom based on the early years of The Rock's life, telling the story of his father, who was a wrestler. A lot of his family is wrestlers. He was brought up around like Andre the Giant, a few other wrestlers, and it just comes to the question of, are biopics any good for wrestlers anyway? And do we need wrestling biopics for that matter? So, do I think biopics of wrestlers are interesting? That's the first question today. I think they can be interesting. I think it depends on the wrestler and it depends on the story. And I also think it depends on the era of wrestling, really. Because there's lots of different eras. And I want to touch on this later on in the show, but really, what eras would work as biopics? So first of all, let's talk about the WWF one, the Hulk Hogan one that is upcoming. I think this one could work for the reason being that this was really the boom of wrestling in the 80s with Hulk Hogan and with the WWF. It was huge. Hulkamania was running wild on everyone, brother. And I think telling the beginnings of Hulk Hogan's story and the early years of the WWF, now the WWE, is an interesting story because it's just highlighting the rise of pro wrestling and the way it become as big as it was. Like, I mean, wrestling for me, I'm a wrestling. First of all, I'm a wrestling fan. I've been a wrestling fan all my life. I switched off for a few years during like the early like 2010s era, but I've got into it over the past couple of years again. But I mean, when I was a kid during the 90s, I had the Attitude Era, I had WCW Nitro, the Monday Night Wars. It was awesome. It was an awesome time to be a wrestling fan. And I do think like the Federation years, late 80s, mid 80s, late 90s, and the Attitude Era, they were the prime years of wrestling. I think the boom and the peak of wrestling at its height was the Attitude Era. And I think once we hit like the 2000s, mid 2000s, wrestling had become a lot more less consumed by people. I don't think it was in the public domain as much as it was like in the 90s and the 80s. And I think that's just because people's viewing habits changed. I think, especially with the Attitude Era, especially, it was edgy at the time. the 90s was an edgy time. We had edgy content, and wrestling was just leaning into that. It was leaning into like sex, drugs, just anything that was deemed to be somewhat taboo or somewhat really like a bad influence, a bad topic to discuss, to involve yourself in, and wrestling's just involved itself in that, in the storylines they were telling, and that's why it was so liked in the 90s, especially for me growing up. I remember going in school and everyone would be like talking about the wrestling. They'd be, and this is me in the UK. Wrestling again, it was worldwide back in the 90s. Now it doesn't feel like. I mean, I've got younger relatives and they don't really follow wrestling, and I'm sure there is young kids out there who love wrestling now and they adore it. But it was like every kid talked about wrestling back in the day, and every kid knew all the wrestlers, they knew all the wrestling moves, and it was just a highlight of talk for everyone. Everyone was talking about it. But as I said, it has definitely went down. I know viewing figures have went down. I listen to a lot of wrestling podcasts like Wrestle Talk, Cultaholic, and wrestling figures. Watching viewing figures has just decreased over the years, especially past couple of years. It has really decreased. But so yeah, wrestling biopics. Do I think they're interesting? Again, I think it's interesting to tell a certain story. I think the rise of the WWF would be fantastic. I think the rise of Hulkamania, Hulk Hogan's rise to stardom. You got to think Hulk Hogan was massive. He was so huge of a star back in the day, and even now, everyone knows who Hulk Hogan is. It's kind of like name a wrestling star now that everyone knows. You have in the wrestling world, WWE, you have like Roman Reigns is the top guy now. He's kind of like the Hulk Hogan of this era. But if you said Roman Reigns to a non-wrestling fan, I'm not too sure whether many people would actually know that name. I really don't think they would. But I think if you, back in like the 80s and 90s, if you mentioned Hulk Hogan, or you even mention that name now, I think everyone knows who Hulk Hogan is. I think they know like his sayings, like say your prayers, eat your vitamins, brother. I think people know it, but I think that is the way wrestling has changed. So telling that rise, the story would be very interesting, I think. And the only thing why it wouldn't work, and then this is another topic I want to talk about. So why don't I think wrestling biopics do work? I think wrestling biopics work, but they don't work because wrestling is so niche. It is such a niche sport. It's like this little bubble within itself. If you're a wrestling fan, you kind of get that. It is wrestling's this own little world. It's like this little fantasy world that we all buy into, especially as adults. We buy into it. We know it's predetermined. We know it's all like a storyline. We know it's very much you're watching a TV show. It's all fictional, to a certain degree, but we buy into it. We buy into this world, this fantasy world, because we enjoy it so much as wrestling fans. I know that's the way I feel. I watch WWE, AEW. I enjoy it all, and I get it. I get what I'm watching. I know what I'm watching, but I just buy into it because I just enjoy it so much. But I do think it is a niche thing. It's a niche topic, a niche sport, a niche style of entertainment. It's not like watching a Marvel movie or watching a football game where it is seen by a lot of people. A lot of people get it. I don't think a lot of people really get wrestling, and I think biopics would work on maybe older stories like Hulk Hogan, maybe like The Rock. But if you're going to do biopics based on modern wrestlers, I don't think people would get it because it's so niche, and I think because modern wrestling now is kind of a biopic upon itself. We have a lot of like wrestlers doing YouTube shows. We see a lot of shoot interviews where they're in real character. I feel like we know who a lot of the wrestlers are now, and for us to see a biopic would be just overkill, really, in a way, because we know a lot of the characters, we know the stories, and I don't think it would work. Like, for example, right? So in AEW, the AEW is like the big competitor of the WWE. and it's all elite wrestling. It started last year or the year before, and it spawned from a YouTube show called Being the Elite, which is based on the elite, the faction called the Elite. Prior to that, they were involved with the Bullet Club. They were members of the Bullet Club. But that show is kind of fictional, but it's also shows like backstage stuff with the wrestlers as well. So you kind of get in like a blurred vision of what wrestling is, and I think the appeal to it is niche. And I don't think, again, a modern audience, an audience that doesn't watch wrestling, would not have any interest in watching a biopic, in my opinion. I think wrestling fans would be interested to a degree, but I think we know it. We know the stories. It's like wrestling. As I said, wrestling feels like a biopic upon itself. Sure, there is backstage stories, and I want to discuss that in a moment. There's definitely stories to be told, but which ones are worthy of making a film or a TV show? And I think there's very few that can really benefit a biopic and benefit it to a degree where a company's going to invest money. So I don't know. I think for me personally, I'd have biopics of the older generations of wrestlers, but I would definitely not do any type of biopics of modern wrestlers unless it was such a unique story that it had to be told. I think it would have already been told on camera to a modern audience, a modern wrestling audience, and there would be no further appeal really. So, what are my thoughts again? Young Rock, Hulk Hogan biopic. I think Chris Hemsworth, who is playing him, I think he is a good choice. I think he's a guy who is going to be able to get pumped up. I think he'll be able to get to the same body type as Hulk Hogan. I'm looking forward to seeing how he approaches that character, how he does the dialogue, how he impersonates the Hulk Hogan, the Hulkster. I think it'll be cool. I think what'll be more interesting as well to see who they cast as the other characters, because I'm sure we're going to get like Vince McMahon. We're going to get a lot of the other wrestlers from that era, like Randy Savage. We're going to get Ric Flair potentially. There's going to be tons of different characters who I'm looking forward to see on screen, see how they adapt them to on screen. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm interested to see how they approach this movie and what is the overall like story arc of the Hulk Hogan movie. The Young Rock TV show, the sitcom, I've watched like a little teaser that came out this past week on The Rock's Instagram, and I've seen a few of the images, and it looks phenomenal. It looks really cool. It looks the aesthetic of it, the style of it looks fantastic. With them saying it's a sitcom, I don't really know what to expect then. So it's a true story to a degree, but then it's also a sitcom base. So who knows what we'll see there? But will we see some true stories, or will we see a bit more fictional stories involved as well? I think with a lot of these things, like the idea of it, the premise for like a Young Rock TV show. The first season, I imagine they'll nail it and they'll get it amazing, and it'll be perfect. It'll be true stories, well adapted. But I feel like the further you get along with series like that, it'll get stale, and the stories won't feel as natural and as real. And I think that's where that one potentially could fail. I think the first season is probably going to be amazing, and then you'll get later seasons that'll be just absolute garbage. But I hope I'm wrong, and I hope it is really good. But yeah, I'm just intrigued to see what the first season does and see if they can maybe prolong something, and if they can. I mean, is it gonna be Young Rock, and then is it gonna go like a few years on where he's a bit older? I think they've got a few different age brackets they're telling the story as. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see. So they are my thoughts on the upcoming biopics by Netflix, I believe. Let me just grab a drink, guys. Right. Wiping my nose. I hope I didn't have any bogeys hanging out. Right. So, the Hulkster's got a drink. The Hulkster's got to drink his water. I'm not eating my vitamins, but I'm drinking my water. So, ones I would like to see. Biopics I would like to see. And I've got a list here. I'm going to go through the list first of all, and I will mention them. So we got, again, I mentioned Mr. McMahon, Vince McMahon. I think the rise of Vince McMahon and the WWF and the way they took all the different territories, the way they built the WWF to be the mammoth of a company that it is today would be a very cool story. I think it would be a great watch. I think it'd be very interesting to see a lot of different characters. I think there's definitely a movie in that or a TV show. I think both could work for a biopic of the telling of Vince McMahon and the early years of WWF, and I think they probably will incorporate a lot of that into the Hulk Hogan movie. Um, Another movie I'd like to see is the Monday Night Wars. So back in the late 90s, we had the Attitude Era. We had Monday Night Raw and Monday Night Nitro and WCW versus WWF. And this was huge. It was the ratings war, and basically WCW won for many weeks, and then WWF won. It was just back and forth. But I think that story would be really good to see. What I'd like to see, though, is incorporated into that is the story of Bill Goldberg and base it around like Bill Goldberg, his rise, his the streak where he was beating. It was like, was it like 50 or I don't know how many people he beat, but Bill Goldberg's story within that would be really cool as a fan of wrestling to see. I think that would be fascinating. Um, yeah, so the Monday Night Wars and even like feature Eric Bischoff, his rise within the WCW. I get also, if you're not a fan of wrestling, this show today may be a bit. You're hearing a lot of different names, you're not getting them. I will try and fill the details in. Eric Bischoff was like the WCW booker back in the day. He was the main guy, and the main guy during the WCW Nitro late 90s when they were hitting their boom. They were really peaking during the Monday Night Wars, and he was very pivotal during that era. And I really like Eric Bischoff. He later went on to be like general manager, on-screen general manager for WWE, and I thought he was great there. But yeah, I think telling Eric Bischoff's story as well would be uh, quite exciting. He seems like a very fun character. I remember I met him a few years ago at like a Comic Con, and he was a really nice guy as well. But yeah, the rise of that Monday Night Wars, telling what was it like behind the scenes, like what was it like in the backstage rooms with the writers who were writing all these shows? How like nerve wracking was it? Were they sweating? Were they like was there anger towards each other? I'm sure there was because it was big back in the day. I don't we don't get that as much now with wrestling. It's not as again because it's not as the appeal of it isn't as huge as it used to be. But I think that would be a great story to tell. So another wrestling biopic I wanted to touch upon was Chris Benoit. This was what was it like late 2000s? If you're not aware of the story of Chris Benoit, he was a fantastic wrestler. He was a wrestler during like ECW, Japan, WCW, WWF, WWE. Great wrestler, but sadly his story did not end. Did not end well. He ended up killing himself, killing his son, killing his wife. It was a double murder suicide. Basically, I know I don't know the full report on this, but his brain was just like from loads of concussion injuries. He just had that many concussions over the years. I think they basically said he had like early Alzheimer's or early dementia because of all the concussions, and he just maybe just like steroid use over the years. It was something affected him, his brain, and that's where he then went and performed that terrible act that he did. But would that make a good film or wrestling story because of the emotion? There's lots of stories like that with wrestling where it's there's a tragic end to the story, but would that tragic end make like a good biopic? Really, I think it's a good topic to touch upon because we've seen quite a few of them over the years. So I mean, we have Chris Benoit's story. We also have like Eddie Guerrero. Again, he was a friend of Chris Benoit, and that could be incorporated into that story where I believe he suffered a heart attack, and he was very young. I think he was in his early 50s, and had a heart attack. And again, it was just probably steroid use over the years, and I know they had to clamp down on the steroids in because of all this, because of Eddie Guerrero's death at the time, and they had like now they have like steroid protocols. Steroid use has been very prominent throughout wrestling history. So that the way steroids was featured in the news and way it was this topic and the topic of concussions as well. I mean, concussions in sport in general is a massive topic, especially now. I mean, here in the UK, concussions is so big of a topic in football, and I know in the US with like the NFL, it is a big topic as well. In wrestling over the years, it's been a massive topic. We've had wrestlers who have been retired for years. Like, take Daniel Bryan. He had concussions for years. He was retired, and then he got cleared after many years, and he returned to the ring because he got cleared. But basically, his career was ruined for years because of concussions. And this has happened to a lot of wrestlers over the years because they've had these concussions. Medical staff have said, we can't clear you because if you have another one, you could seriously have some really bad brain damage or many number of really bad impacts to your health. So we have like the Eddie Guerrero, the Chris Benoit story. We also have Owen Hart. Owen Hart is a member of the very historic Hart family, and he died. He fell to his death during a live show, a live pay-per-view. He was doing this character. I can't remember the character's name. It was the Blue something. The Blue Star or Blue Shooter. Basically, he had this character where he was like this superhero character, and he would come down on this this string, like this. What do you call it? Like sort of like a high rope maybe. I don't know if that's what it's called, but basically comes down on this jet rope to the ring, but the rope snapped and he just fell to the ring. And you can watch it on YouTube. It doesn't show the clip of him falling, but you can see clips of the commentators, Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler at the time, commentating on this and saying this is not part of the show, ladies and gents. And they break character saying like Owen Hart is really in a bad way here, and he died. He fell to his death, and again, this was during a live WWF show at the time. It was awful to hear, and for me, looking at that again, is that worthy? Can you say that these tragic events would make a story worthwhile for a biopic? Because films, lie upon sometimes tragic events to make it a good story to make you feel. I mean, you could have like start with this tragic event of like Owen Hart's death, and then you tell the story leading up to his death, leading up to that event, the story of his youth as a wrestler. And the same with like Chris Benoit. You start with like the tragic event, or you end with the tragic event. It makes it a pivotal scene within a movie, and I think some stories like that, I think personally as a fan, I think I'd be interested to see. I would be interested to see the way they tackle the topic. But my only worry with like the wrestling world is that they don't want to tell the true story. They want to cover a lot of it because they don't want the truth coming out about how this happened and how really the negative image of, like, say for WWE, like if they tell a story of either Owen Hart or Chris Benoit, is it going to reflect badly on them as a company? And will it bring up things from the past that they don't want to come out? So I don't know whether they would okay that. I don't think a Chris Benoit biopic is going to be authorized by WWE. Not a chance. I don't even think an Owen Hart one would be. I think if either of these productions are put in place, they are not authorized by WWE. And if they are featured in it, WWE, I don't think they will give the okay at all in regards to that. So, but I would be, as a fan of wrestling, I'd be interested to see that. There's a show on there's a show that is out now. It's run for a few series, and it's Dark Side of the Ring, and it tells like the story of like Owen Hart and lots of different tragic events and dark events during wrestling history. And it's a really good show. It's the past season, which is narrated by Chris Jericho, Le Champion. It's fantastic. It featured the story of Chris Benoit, and there was another one where it featured the story of Owen Hart as well. Both very good episodes to watch. I would highly recommend you watch Dark Side of the Ring. As a wrestling fan or a non-wrestling fan, it is well worth the watch. They get really in detail of like them stories leading up to them events and telling the story around and after the events as well, how it impacted other people, family members, wrestlers, his colleagues, their colleagues. Very, very, very gripping documentary series. Well worth the watch. Another last one I really want to talk about is one that could be adapted to being a biopic, and it is the story of Bret Hart. And basically, I think what would work is Bret Hart had during his last year as in the WWF, a film crew like documented his journey, and there was a documentary called Wrestling with Shadows. And basically, this documented his move going into WCW, but it also documented the Montreal Screwjob, famous wrestling event. And I watched the documentary for the first time a couple of years ago, and Wrestling with Shadows is a phenomenal documentary. Again, it's a true telling. You see Bret in his home with his family, how he feels about potentially going to WCW because they were going to give him money. Basically, WWF offered him a big long contract, but then they couldn't pay him it. So he got offered a chance to go to WCW. It was okayed by Vince McMahon, and he was going to go out as WWF champion. He wasn't going to lose the belt, but they screwed him over in the final match. And then it's shown like the mic was on at the end when he goes backstage and he's talking to Vince, and it's chaos. It's chaos backstage. But I think if you took the basis of what that documentary was, the story of that documentary, and feature the Montreal Screwjob and his events, his time leading up to that, and then moving to WCW with Bret Hart, I think that would be a really good story. And again, you could just take that documentary. I know they did it with the Page with the Page movie, Fighting with My Family, or Wrestling with My Family. They took a documentary, I believe it was of the same name, and The Rock seen that documentary and he was like, I want to make that into a movie. And that's what it got. It got fictionalized to a degree, but the basis of it was what that documentary was, and then it was made into that film, which I really enjoyed. I thought it was a really cool British film about pro wrestling, about the WWE. So I enjoyed that. So Wrestling with Shadows, I think that would be the perfect. I think it would be the only possible choice as well. If we're looking at take away what we're seeing with the Hulk Hogan one and the Young Rock, I don't think we'll ever see the tragic events of Owen Hart or Chris Benoit stories told. I think I could definitely see the Bret Hart story, the Montreal Screwjob and Wrestling with Shadows being told on screen. I think it would be a fantastic watch for fans. And I think Bret Hart is a name that wrestling fans, old and new, know as well. So I think it would work as a biopic, and it is definitely one I would love to see. So let's move along. I'm just going to have another quick drink, guys. So, housekeeping. Let's get to the housekeeping section of the show. Imagine if I did this show where I was doing my not so Hollywood Hulk Hogan or not so Hollywood AP impression during the whole show. I don't think it would be that good. Let me tell you something, brother. All the Hulkamaniacs have never been a listen because it's housekeeping section of the show, brother. Are you ready? Yeah, I know it's an awful impression, but it's all I've got. It's all I've got, guys. Housekeeping anyway. So I just want to again continuing from last week. Really, thank you all for the new views upon the channel. I had a lot of views recently over the past couple of months, and it's been phenomenal. It's been cool to see the appreciation for the videos. It's cool to see the comments on the videos, and I love interacting with the community that is growing here on this channel, and it is awesome talking about movies. I really enjoy it, and long may it continue. Long may it continue, ladies and gentlemen. Housekeeping, though. I want to, again, say thank you. I also want to talk about what is coming up for the content surrounding this channel, surrounding myself, moving forward. So I am working on some new videos at the moment, more movie-related videos, more home cinema videos as well, talking about home cinema topics, things within a home cinema, home theatre. So there are some of the upcoming videos I'm working on at the moment, and doing more movie list videos. I think the movie lists are fun to do. I really enjoy just talking about some of my favourite movies from the collection behind me. And I think something else I'm working on now is, I don't want to just say it and then not follow through, because I am working on it, and it is something that hopefully will be coming out in the next month or two, is a Patreon podcast. I want to add more content to my Patreon account. I do, at this moment in time, I do comics, I do webcomics, and this has been over a year now. I put a webcomic out every single Monday based on the Purge of the Ghost. It's the Purge of the Ghost story based on my web series Masters and Realms. I forgot what it was called then. It's a fun one page every week, just a fun little story. Nothing major. It's just a fun story to follow. I hope you enjoy it, and I do put the videos on this channel as well, telling the webcomic read along. But I want to add more to my Patreon. I want to add more movie related stuff to the Patreon as well. So soon I will be working on a podcast, like bonus podcast for the Patreon, and I want them all to be movie related. I want them to feature movies, and I want to maybe add, like I said, like quizzes and a few different things. So I am working on one at the moment, and it is going well. I'm prepping it. I'm hoping to do the recording over the next week or so. I don't know exactly when it's going to go up, but I just want to say that I am working on something, and there is going to be more content, because I think if you want to buy into what I'm doing here, if you want to see more content, I want to make more content available to you, and I want to make it affordable as well. I don't want to rip anyone off. That is not my intention ever. I just want to offer more content, and if I can offer a podcast that you'll enjoy and you want to buy it, it's there for you. So it is something I'm working on at this moment in time. I just want to give you an update to say that something is working. The wheels are in motion to getting some more content your way, ladies and gentlemen. So that is, I believe that's the end of the Saturday Movie Show for today. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Final answer, Wrestling Biopics, good or bad? Do I want to see them? I want to see them because I'm a wrestling fan. But I want to know whether you want to see him, brother. I want to know if you want to see more. Let me get the glasses on. I can't do it without the glasses in. I want to sell you something, brother. I want to know if you want to see more biopics on this channel, or not on this channel. If you want to see more biopics being released worldwide, brother, that's what I want to hear. And if you're not happy with that, Hulkamania is gonna run wild on you, brother. So let me know your thoughts. Do you want to see biopics? I can't do that voice all day. I can't do it. It's too much. It's going to wreck my voice. Let me know what biopics you would like to see, and what do you think of the Hulk Hogan and the Young Rock biopics that are upcoming to us all as film and TV viewers. What are your thoughts on them? Let me know your thoughts on today's show as well. Did you enjoy today's show? And what did you think of my not so Hollywood Hulk Hogan impression? Thank you very much for staying tuned for today. I hope you have a good one.